My sister and I accidentally saved a rich lady from a car crash knowing our family's financial struggles. She offered my sister and me each a life-altering opportunity as a token of gratitude. One of us could marry her only son and inherit the family fortune. The other would receive a cool $5 million in cash. My sister, ever the opportunist, jumped at the chance to marry the son, even dumping her fiancé of many years. In her eyes, a young, successful husband worth millions was far more valuable than a measly $5 million. But what she didn't know was that this seemingly gentle and quiet man was a total psycho. Within a year, he had tormented her so badly that she was mentally broken and wished she had never met him. Meanwhile, I took the $5 million, studied abroad, earned a bunch of degrees, and returned home to start my own business. I caught the wave, met the right people, and my career took off. I even had a bunch of eligible bachelors chasing after me. Then, I woke up, and there I was again, my sister and I sitting in front of Mrs. Vanderlyn. Mrs. Vanderlyn smiled warmly, her handsome, quiet son sitting beside her. On the other side, there was a check for $5 million. Haley, Riley, who wants to choose first? My sister immediately raised her hand, pointing straight at the check for $5 million. In that moment, I knew she remembered everything. 2.1-inch Haley, Riley, I'm a straightforward woman, so I won't beat around the bush. Mrs. Vanderlyn began, her smile as bright as ever. This is my only son, Xavier. He was hurt as a child, and has become rather introverted. He doesn't like to talk much, and he's not interested in going into business with me. So, I'd like to pick one of you to be my daughter-in-law, and eventually take over the company. As for the other, I can give you $5 million up front. Why don't you two discuss how you want to choose? As Mrs. Vanderlyn finished her proposal, a flood of bloody memories rushed through my head. I knew I had been given a second chance at life. The last image from my past life was the sterile white walls of the mental hospital. Haley, her hair a tangled mess, had suddenly pushed me off the 7th floor balcony. As I crashed to the ground, I could almost hear the blood and brain matter oozing out of my ears, mixed with Haley's desperate screams. Why, Riley, why do you get to be so successful and live such a good life? That luck should have been mine. It's because I made the wrong decision, and you reaped all the benefits. Haley blamed all her misfortunes on me. But in the past life, she had been the one who chose to marry Mrs. Vanderlyn's son, wanting to be the wife of a wealthy family. She even dumped her long-term boyfriend for it. Who knew that the seemingly gentle Mr. Vanderlyn was actually a total psycho? On their wedding night, he tied her to the bed and lectured her on Lagrange's equations all night long. Afterward, he gave her problems to solve, expecting her to apply the equations on the spot. For every mistake, he pulled out one of her fingernails. The next night, it was Newton-Leibniz formulas. If she couldn't learn them, he'd pull out a tooth for every wrong answer. Of course, Haley only told me all this when she had completely lost her mind and was screaming hysterically in the mental hospital. At first, I felt sorry for her and wanted to help her escape her misery and get justice, but then, I realized that her biggest source of pain wasn't being abused by Xavier, but the fact that I didn't suffer the same fate, and actually had a much better life than her, fueled by jealousy and resentment. She ignored our sisterly bond and pushed me off the building herself. Now, reborn, sitting in front of Mrs. Vanderlyn and her son, my palms were sweating with anxiety. I vowed that this time, I would never concern myself with Haley's fate, and I certainly wouldn't visit her in the mental hospital. Once I finished my studies, started my business, and made a fortune, I would bring Grandma to live with me in another country just as I expected. Haley eagerly raised her hand first. She wanted to choose first ever since we were kids. With our poor family and limited resources, she was always competing with me for everything, never giving in. Being easygoing by nature, I was used to giving way, especially this time, with the valuable knowledge I possessed. I could watch everything unfold calmly. Mrs. Vanderlyn, I actually have a boyfriend. Haley continued, so why don't you keep Xavier for my sister? Besides, I think I'll take the $5 million. My inner voice screamed, my pupils dilating on their own. I knew Haley's nature too well. Greedy, arrogant, and unwilling to work hard. $5 million would probably be gone in no time. There was no way that the idea of being the wife of a wealthy man with endless wealth would not appeal to her, but this time, she didn't even glance at Mr. Vanderlyn. Focusing her greedy gaze solely on the check, she leaned toward me, took the check in one hand, and whispered in my ear, Riley, this time, it's your turn to suffer. In that instant, I realized she remembered everything. 2.2 It turned out that just before I died in the last life, I heard a loud thud beside me, the sound of her body hitting the ground after jumping right after me. It turned out that she had planned to die with me all along, hating me so much that she had to drag me down with her. Now, Haley was taking the initiative once again, snatching the immediate cash benefit, and trying to push me toward Mr. Vanderlyn. I heard that Xavier doesn't socialize much, and loves to read, especially math. Haley said, trying to pawn off Xavier. It just so happens that my sister, Riley, is also a bookworm. I'm sure they'll have a lot in common. Let me marry Xavier, let me become her crazy, psycho husband's plaything, and then watch her take the $5 million and live happily ever after. I may be reborn, but I haven't lost my mind. So, taking Haley by surprise, I snatched the check back from her before she could even warm it up, and then handed it back to Mrs. Vanderlyn with respect. Mrs. Vanderlyn, thank you for your and Mr. Vanderlyn's kindness, but we can't accept such a generous gift. Although our family isn't well off, Grandma has always taught us to be honest and kind. Saving you the other day was just a good deed. Really, you don't need to be so polite. With that, I stood up and glanced at Mr. Vanderlyn, who had been sitting silently by the side. Honestly, the guy was so handsome that it was almost illegal. If it weren't for my memories from the past life, no one would believe that behind that pretty face was a mind as messed up as a sewer. Haley thought she was in control of the situation, taking advantage and trying to push me into a pit of fire? Well, let's just go ahead and practice the traditional virtues of helping others, and nobody gets anything. 3-inch Riley, are you crazy? Back home, Haley immediately went off on me. Mrs. van der Linde is worth billions, and Xavier is her only son. He's introverted, doesn't like socializing, and can't manage a company. It's obvious that Mrs. van der Linde is going to pass all her wealth to a trusted daughter-in-law in the future. Why would you give up such a great opportunity? Haley tried to encourage me. Riley, even if you're not thinking about us, you should think about Grandma. We didn't have parents growing up, and Grandma raised us all by herself. She's over 70 years old, and she still goes out to collect recyclables in the morning and sells wontons at night. No matter how much we try to talk her out of it, she always wants to save up more money for our dowries. Don't you want to give Grandma a better life in her old age? I smiled wryly. I'll be graduating with my master's degree next year. I'm confident that I can find a good job and take care of Grandma. Haley, I'm not going to marry him. If you don't want to give up the opportunity, why don't you just marry Mr. van der Linde yourself? Are you trying to make things difficult for me? Haley looked at me with teary eyes. You know I've been with Alex for almost a year. How can I betray Alex just to be with Xavier? Mrs. van der Linde agreed to give us 3 more days to consider. Riley, just give in to Mr. van der Linde, otherwise, we can't just take the money and reject the man. It'll seem like we're disgusted by Mrs. van der Linde's son. It'll be so embarrassing, right? I clicked my tongue in annoyance, as if she wasn't the one who dumped that sucker in the past life. But no sooner had I kicked Haley out of my room than Grandma had an accident. She suddenly fainted while closing up her wonton stand at night. When she was taken to the hospital, her condition was critical. The doctor said it was a stroke caused by a severe allergic reaction, along with complications from her long-term diabetes. But they couldn't figure out what had caused the allergic reaction, and when Grandma was taken to the hospital, Haley was with her. Only Haley knew what she had eaten, for the cost of the ICU was $6,000 a day. By the 3rd day of Grandma's stay, I had spent all of my meager savings of $20,000. I couldn't get through to Haley on the phone, so I sent her a message saying that I was ready to sign the gift agreement with Mrs. van der Linde. Sure enough, she appeared at the tea house we had arranged. Like some magical clown, I agreed to marry Mrs. van der Linde's son, Xavier, and Haley was happily gifted $5 million in cash. But the condition was that she had to give half of the money to pay for Grandma's medical treatment. Haley readily agreed. Rather than being upset about losing half the money, I believed she was even happier to see my misery after marrying Xavier. A week later, Grandma was successfully transferred from the ICU to a regular room and was no longer endangered. I got my marriage license with Xavier and moved into the villa that Mrs. van der Linde had bought for us. On my wedding night, I set up a whiteboard, markers, and a stack of advanced mathematics textbooks that I had prepared in advance. When Xavier came out of the bathroom, his face turned paler than frost. I chuckled inwardly. This is called fighting a psycho with their own twisted logic, leaving them with nowhere to run, right? What are you doing? Xavier's Adam's apple bobbed up and down. The room was rather warm. He walked over to the bedside and picked up the water glass on the nightstand, gulping it down in one go. I sat on the bed, cross-legged like a duck, tilting my head and looking at him calmly. Of course, we're going to play some exciting games that only adults are qualified to play. Calculus. Xavier's eyebrows furrowed even tighter. As I rubbed my hands together excitedly and moved to stand in front of the whiteboard, I wrote a bunch of f(x) equations with a marker. Where should we start? I paused, looking at him with a blink. Partial differential equations? Differential equations? Or limits and derivatives? Newton-Leibniz are all just beginner level. Should I give you some more difficult problems? Yang-Mills existence and mass gap hypothesis, or Navier-Stokes equations. Have you heard of them? But then, those math formulas were silenced by 2 warm lips. 5-inch wait, hold on. I didn't understand what was happening. Why was Xavier giving me such an unexpected surprise? I struggled to catch my breath from his soft, invasive kiss. You, don't do this, Xavier. This isn't how the wedding night should be. He propped himself up on one arm beside me, his eyes dark and passionate as he looked at me. Do you know how sexy you are when you say Navier-Stokes equations? Right now, I just want to explore the limits of negative distance deviation with you. Limits, negative, distance, what the hell? The next morning, I woke up in Xavier's arms. He was still asleep, probably because he was too tired from last night's activities. Sunlight squeezed through the cracks in the white curtains, landing on his thick eyelashes. They trembled lightly with each even breath. My face flushed as I replayed every detail of last night in my mind, feeling confused. Was Xavier really the psycho that Haley had described? Although he had been a bit crazy when he was with me last night, but he kissed me gently, listened to my feelings, and even carried me to the bathroom to clean up afterward. Aside from his habit of following the Fibonacci sequence, he didn't seem as scary as Haley had said, right? Did he sense that I was prepared and was deliberately holding back to test me? I quietly pulled out my multifunctional self-defense bag from under the pillow and examined each item inside. Pepper spray, Swiss Army knife, high-voltage stun gun. But then, Xavier suddenly opened his eyes. I forced a smile and said good morning. But what I didn't expect was that Xavier suddenly pounced on me like a madman, his eyes bloodshot and his hands gripping my neck tightly. I'm not useless. Say it again, and I'll kill you. I was caught off guard by his sudden attack, falling backward and gripping his wrists tightly. No, don't, Xavier, let go. Just when I thought I was about to suffocate, he suddenly seemed to snap out of his murderous rage and return to normal. He picked me up, but I was already coughing and gasping for air. Riley, I just, don't touch me.